to the Tourism AI podcast, where we talk about all things at the intersection of artificial intelligence and tourism. And today we're continuing on our format where we talk about some of the headlines happening at the intersection of artificial intelligence and tourism. And we break it down for you a little bit. So Kendel, why don't you jump in and take over?
So like last time, we are starting with some news headlines in the last week or two. So the first one, the headline is Singapore's National Tourism Board and OpenAI sign Asia First AI MOU in tourism. So let's break that down a little bit. Singapore is the first organization in Asia to embrace AI. They are using it to elevate visitor experiences through multilingual assistance, immersive storytelling, data-driven marketing, operational forecasting. Their chief technology officer has said that they're really going to leverage OpenAI's capabilities to address productivity challenges and just accelerate AI. So I think this is super cool. Singapore is kind of always ahead of the curve in Asia. Just some initial thoughts on this, Peter, before we dive into some questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, this kind of speaks to the shift that's happening in the sector in general, where, you know, people have been in the experimental mode for the last little while, and we're really getting to more of a kind of a strategic sort of implementation world now. So this to me is sort of some of the first early signals that we're starting to move into much more of a formal integration of AI into tourism. Now it's been happening all over the place informally, and there's been a lot of experimentations, but I think we're going to start to see a real acceleration. And, you know, this is an interesting one because it's at the sort of national level, which, you know, is really interesting. I mean, for me, I always think about AI adoption, you know, either from a top-down or bottom-up perspective, and I think that both things need to happen. So obviously Destination Canada in Canada has been pretty active implementing some technologies, but something like this partnership is pretty interesting in the world. And I think it'll really help move the industry forward in a lot of ways. So I think there's a lot of learnings here. Certainly, you know, a story to watch for all tourism leaders, and understand how they start to implement sort of AI technologies with this partnership, and, you know, really start to explore what's possible.
So I know that I think like what you said there, the buy-in at the national level is really important because obviously a lot of the policies and things that come from that are going to trickle down to well, let's just say Canada, for example, the provincial and regional levels. So we know that talent gaps is a big issue right now, privacy concerns, like all these things. What do you think it means when there's national buy-in at that level for kind of all of those?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, you can have a lot of coordination and you can avoid a lot of mistakes, right? So if you have the national level buy-in and you have sort of the board at the national level involved, you know, really you're setting the tone from the top, right? And, you know, really you're having the most senior people in the industry involved in really strategic conversations around what this means for the economy, for the industry, and to your point, kind of how it could trickle down to you know, to the lower levels or the municipal levels and provincial levels. So, you know, again, I think for me, you know, both a top-down and a bottom-up approach is what's needed for successful adoption. But having that leadership from the top, really digging in and understanding and experimenting is really valuable. And, you know, what's interesting about this story in particular for me is obviously they have, you know, Jordan Tan, Chief Technology Officer, Singapore Tourism Board, is his title. So for me, you know, the fact that they have somebody in that position, it kind of sets a precedent that, you know, obviously having a chief technology officer and that could kind of be involved in kind of leading this conversation is really, to me, it's exciting. And again, I think there's a lot of learnings that could happen at this senior level that could be then dispersed, you know, to all of the tourism organizations in the country, right? So to me, it's very efficient, an efficient way to adopt AI and learn and, you know, sort of, I guess, make the mistakes or not, or get the learnings and then learn as a country. So I think Singapore is going to, you know, obviously they're leading here and this positions them as a leader and will probably keep them in a leadership position going forward.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been in tourism for like 20 years and never did I think there would be like a chief technology officer in tourism. It's so interesting. Do you think this is a trend that we'll continue to see?
I think it's something that needs to happen, and I can tell you, you know, as you know, Kendall, I've been having a lot of interviews with a lot of tourism organizations, a few U.S. chambers of commerce that also have tourism in their purview, in their mandate. And you know, like we're an industry that uses a lot of data, that's trying to understand data. That's, you know, like we shouldn't be underestimated as an industry from a data perspective. This is a very data driven industry. There's a lot of data touch points. So having this sort of chief technology officer, somebody that can have that sort of 30,000 foot view of all the different pieces and can put them together strategically, I think it's the way we need to go. I think we need to, it's interesting, to your point, tourism's always been seen as a lagging industry when it comes to technology. And I think that, this AI revolution actually positions tourism as gives tourism an opportunity to become a leader in AI adoption and technology adoption and data and using data to make better decisions. So I think, I think it's something we're going to see more and more of. And these conversations I've been having with these different leaders, they're all using data and technology in various different, very sophisticated ways, but they don't have that sort of strategic leadership position in their organizations yet. And, it's a missing component. I think there's going to be some challenges with respect to finding the talent because, there's only so much talent out there and the talent wars are getting pretty intense. And so, as you and I have discussed many times, Kendall, hopefully we can have technology help support some of that as well. But I think it's going to be a really critical position going forward for tourism.
Absolutely. So what they're using it really for, the main thing is AI powered personalization. So I think that's a super easy way for different organizations to start, right? Why do you think that is the case? Like, so personalized itineraries without needing a really heavy tech investment. How can local DMOs, let's say, pilot this as their AI use case?
Yeah. Yeah, no, personalized itineraries is, I would say, kind of almost the starting point conversation I have with a lot of DMOs in terms of opportunity. And so, certainly this partnership is one to watch, I think, for the tourism industry. But honestly, I've been working with a couple of DMOs and regional DMOs where we're actually just creating custom GPTs where we can actually personalize itineraries to some extent. So there are ways just to use the tools out of the box. Obviously, kind of a more sophisticated partnership like this just allows you to add more context and be a little more, sort of data driven and sophisticated for that. But it's just the direction things are going. And, what's interesting about tourism and specifically and in context of OpenAI and other leading large language model providers is they all need data. They all need, tourism can feed these tools a lot in terms of data and understanding kind of the movement of people and how they travel and the things they search for. And so again, we have a lot of data. And, the ability to personalize obviously just makes the tourism experience better for the end user. But actually that really gives a lot of training data to OpenAI, for example, here as well. So they're going to learn a lot from this partnership as well. So, I think OpenAI has a lot to gain in this type of partnership as well. Everybody's looking, all the LLM companies are looking for, okay, we've almost consumed all the data on the internet to train these models. And so where do we get data from next, right? And, this is very rich real-time data. And so these partnerships, I think we're going to see more and more partnerships like this because, the AI companies have a big vested interest in sort of, building partnerships that give them access to this type of data so that they can, one, help personalize the experience, but also just, teach their models with better information.
Perfect. So we're going to jump into story number 2. And that had a lot of backlash last week. So Delta announced this AI pricing strategy and it just went wild online. People were bashing it like crazy. So I feel like I've experienced this, searching on Expedia for pricing. I'll be looking for hotels and I get one price and I kind of come back to it and it's higher. And then my husband will look and it's a lower price. And so I do feel like there's this dynamic pricing kind of already embedded in these OTAs. But with Delta and this AI powered, really they're taking personalization to a whole new level in terms of how their fares are based. Now they have said that they aren't using it for that purpose and they will be, keeping it fair and transparent, but it really caught the attention of the government and got a lot of scrutiny. The government gave it a lot of scrutiny. So I guess just to start, your initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, first of all, dynamic pricing is not new. Every major tour, every airline uses it. Many hotels use it. So conceptually, it's not a new thing. But to the point of data and personalization and all of these things, the ability to use dynamic pricing differently is starting to become a bit of a new thing. And I think to me, this is one of those you got to be pretty damn careful in terms of what you do because. To your point, the negative backlash, the negative PR that comes from something like this is really harmful. So, I think it's funny when I teach AI implementation, sometimes I say just because you can doesn't mean you should. And this is an example to me of like really be careful, because if it starts to expose you that you're sort of leveraging these tools to exploit people financially, that's not good for your reputation. So I think transparency is the name of the game here. I think being extremely upfront and forthright about kind of how you're using it, when you're using it, why you're using it. To me, it's actually an opportunity, dynamic pricing, as opposed to maximizing the benefit, the amount of money you can get off an individual person. To me, it's actually more of an opportunity in the opposite way of like rewarding your most loyal customers and giving them really personalized offers that are very valuable to them. Like, you know what I mean? I look at it like the flip side of the coin. There's so many exciting opportunities around this that, hotels and airlines and stuff can really leverage to really stand out in the market. And unfortunately, there's going to be some bad players that do the wrong thing, and I think they're going to get caught. I think people are paying really close attention right now.
I would love to see some use cases of these companies using it for the positive side, like you're saying. That
Yeah.
would be great to see. I was going to ask, should they disclose when they're using AI pricing, which you have said yes, they should. I think this is a great opportunity to actually talk about, as an organization, we always talk about this, like being very transparent with our AI use, having your AI policies on your website. Maybe just for a second, you can touch on that, because I know we talk about it a lot.
Yeah, so just like for context, obviously we've had our responsible AI use policies and principles on both of our websites, ciprcommunications.com and tourismainetwork.com, for well over a year now. And just recently we went through a process of updating those policies. And, we went through a whole process with our leadership team, our staff, internal training, and, now we're updating our policies on our website. We're also talking about adding those to all of our contracts and just being very loud and proud. I think it's such an opportunity to be transparent about these things and get in front of it. The last thing you want to do is get caught because you're hiding something, and it's a risk. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether you're in tourism, whether you're in marketing, whether you know what I mean. It's a huge risk, and like people are feeling away about about AI adoption right now, and it's not all positive. So it's I think it's a great opportunity. In fact, Kendall, I was just talking to Christina about it this morning, and I'd like to issue some press releases about the fact that we've updated our responsible use policies and principles, and sort of share it proudly and let the world know, because we want to lead. And so to me, this is a leadership opportunity. And an opportunity for me. Transparency is a competitive advantage if you can leverage it well. And again, I think people can get behind these things if they see the value and the benefit to them. So like, again, as a consumer, I'm not gonna. We're a member of a hotel chain. We have a membership going on with them, and I'm more than happy to have them use AI to for good. It might not even be hotel discounts, but maybe they learn about my preferences for drinks or food or entertainment and whatever over time, and they can do creative partnerships with other tourism providers and vendors to add value to me as a consumer. I think that's a fantastic opportunity. But if you start using AI to try to hose me, I'm gone. And I think people are gonna they're gonna vote with their wallets very quickly. And so to me, the risk of doing the wrong thing here is way too high reputationally. And this whole space is showing us that people are more than willing to sort of jump all over the people that do the wrong thing and make an example of them. And so my recommendation is be transparent, be honest, be upfront, and don't be the example in the news that you don't want to be.
Yeah, do you think when these things happen, when there's like a lot of bad publicity about something, that actually tends to slow down adoption of other organizations than trying some AI dynamic pricing?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I actually think it has the potential to slow things down, but at the same time, it has the potential to accelerate. So I think it just depends on the company and their risk tolerance, and also their willing to exploit opportunities. So to me, one of my competitors gets a bad rap for something. To me, that seems like an opportunity, right? They get in trouble in the media for doing the wrong thing. Well, let's explain how we do the right thing, right? So I think it's going to go both ways a little bit. There are going to be those companies that are afraid to do to try things and experiment, and they'll probably hold back. But at the same time, there's going to be competitors looking to exploit opportunities. And We're in a very dynamic business environment right now, and I think people really need to sort of take pause and slow down. I just had, coffee with a friend who's in a completely different industry, and we were just talking about the opportunities, the disruptive opportunities in the business environment right now are unlike anything I've ever seen in my entire career. And, it's exciting if you have the right mindsets. I think some people will freeze and some people will like just jump on it and run and do some pretty innovative, fun things. So to me, it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I guess if there's any airlines listening right now, it'll be a good opportunity. We'll see what happens, but we'll keep an eye out if there's any, some really good use cases that come along from this.
For sure.
Okay, big story number 3. Headline: African tourism businesses lead AI adoption, content creation first. Okay, so this is a study that's come out of Africa, and it has found that 85% of African tourism businesses are already using AI, and they are applying it first to content creation and marketing. So this is kind of similar to what we discussed above. But I love how they're using it. So they're creating destination guides in multiple languages. They're responding to inquiries from international travelers in their native tongue. And then they're adapting marketing messages for cultural nuances in different regions. Just think about how this could apply to Canada, right? And all of our different Indigenous communities. And they're also scaling content without a lot of proportional increases. So very cool to see this study come out of Africa and how they're using it. Why do you think, and again, this is kind of building on what we talked about earlier, but why do you think content development and marketing is just where most tourism organizations are starting with AI adoption?
Yeah, no, and you know what? It's actually where most organizations, period, are starting with AI adoption. So it's not just tourism. In fact, we're part of the WSI Global Digital Marketing Network, and they just came out with a fairly large, comprehensive study on kind of AI use across small businesses. And really, marketing and communications and content is like the number one area where everybody's starting. So I think it's, first of all, it's the easy, low-hanging fruit starting point. It doesn't take a lot of sort of technical skill or knowledge to sort of like use AI to do content well. I think we have obviously things like being able to translate into other languages, like that technology has become really good now. And, if I look at tourism specifically and the opportunities in tourism and AI and, the whole topic of job loss, I actually look at tourism very differently. I think, AI gives tourism opportunities to do things that just was never possible before, right? And so obviously tourism is a international industry and you're marketing to international audiences and all different dialects and languages and stuff like that. So it's like, to me, translation is like the lowest hanging possible fruit of, finding new markets and expanding your market potential, right? And, I think about even this podcast, and an idea I've been thinking about lately is like, we should have it in Spanish. Why not, right? There's an entire, huge population in the world that's Spanish speaking, right? So again, it's just like the opportunity to you sort of, all of a sudden reach so many more people and make yourself more accessible. And I think to me, it aligns very well with also the experience that tourists are starting to have with AI, in the sense of like, now I can go and I can use tools to read a menu in my own native language, even if it wasn't written in that language, right? So, it's just making tourism so much more accessible. So it just makes sense, right? So yeah, I think it's sort of a natural starting point. It's probably the least risky to some extent place to start as well. There are risks, of course, but generally speaking, it's, you're sort of anything. I had this conversation yesterday. Anything you're sort of going to be putting out into the world, you're not too concerned if you're using AI tools to put it out there, because you're not worried about protecting privacy or data or information, because you're going to put it out anyways, right? So to me, it's just sort of like the natural starting point.
Yeah, I'm sure you have some good use cases of working with the different organizations that we work with and just have seen their evolution, like their entry point as like marketing and content and maybe PR, and then the evolution to how they use it. Do you have any examples at the top of your head? Just kind of throwing this one at you as to like what, like, do you see any trends? I guess what I'm trying to ask is like where people naturally go to next after marketing.
Yeah, I think from marketing, it sort of starts with marketing. And I guess I should say the other kind of point I missed to answer your previous question around marketing is like, also marketing people tend to be a little more on the innovative side. We're using a lot of tools. We use technology every day. So it's sort of a natural place, right? I think that the other trend I see from marketing is actually in leadership and strategic business and strategic planning is sort of the next place. Because I think people see what happens in marketing and it creates a bunch of aha moments. And then I think leaders start to say, wow, I wonder if I can use it for helping me with strategic planning or reporting, or, you know what I mean? And that's, definitely an area you and I are spending a lot of time on, is the reporting. We have a whole, goal to build an AI powered reporting tool for the tourism industry. But again, it just makes sense because, like, you know what I mean? Like, the data's there. It's really good at that kind of stuff, right? And it's, relatively low risk, right? So, obviously if you're using it for strategic planning, you're going to be the human in the loop, always checking and double checking. And it's not like accounting where it's like, it might be looking at 300,000 numbers and then it could get one wrong and that could change the whole equation, right? Like strategic planning, it's like, okay, well, here's your 5 strategic priorities. Do they make sense? Okay, yeah, I can go on, right? So it's just sort of like, to me, it's all the places, those are very natural places where a large language model will perform well, and where really humans and LLMs can kind of coexist together in a very, very kind of meaningful way.
Love that. So just to bring it back to this study then, so Africa, they're using this really to help them scale their storytelling. And I do see a lot of similarities, like I already mentioned, with Canada, our Indigenous community. And I know this is a conversation that you've had lots, Peter, with different clients, and just a kind of a personal passion of yours. One of your personal passions is that sovereign AI. How can we kind of take what they're doing and almost like scale that, or like translate it to Canadian AI policies or strategies?
Yeah, and that's a big question, and there's lots of different ways. So first of all, I will just say that, obviously we can use AI to really scale storytelling in a lot of different ways, but we also have to be careful, right? And so, you mentioned sovereign AI, you mentioned Indigenous tourism. Like, I think, for example, there's a huge opportunity for Indigenous Canada to preserve their culture, heritage, and language with the support of AI. I think there's a massive, massive opportunity, and I think there's a huge desire for that to happen. And, that involves probably some forward-thinking Indigenous communities and leaders willing to basically, and there's a lot of oral storytelling that happens in Indigenous cultures, and really capturing those stories, right? Capturing those elders telling those stories with technology and then preserving it somehow. Now, again, the whole, preservation of, or the whole sovereign AI piece, like, the systems need to be set up in a way that Indigenous communities can feel 100% confident that their information and their data is going to be theirs, and it's not going to be sort of taken away from them or exploited by these AI companies. So there's a lot of data protection and privacy implications and considerations, but I think that the technology is there and there's ways to do that. And then, communities also have to then decide which of those stories they're willing to share publicly and which kind of remain in their culture, because they're, sacred stories and sacred teachings from their culture, right? And so there's a lot of strategic planning around that and a lot of thought that needs to go into it. However, if that work is done, I mean, that really kind of lends itself to some amazing kind of storytelling, amazing telling that, sort of helping tourists understand, the history, the culture, the language, and how it sort of, developed into the sort of Canada we have today, and all those types of things, right? So I think there's a really good opportunity, but it needs to be sort of done thoughtfully. And, the other thing I'll say too is, I think there's a huge role for Indigenous communities and DMOs to be the curators of the stories, and to sort of that, be the human point of contact, if you will. So, the one concern that I've heard a lot from a tourism perspective is, the AIs will make things up about your tourism about your destination, or, it'll literally like make things up about Indigenous culture or heritage or language. That's not true. And so, the people who are the real keepers of those stories and of the truth are the Indigenous communities, are the DMOs. And so there's a huge role to play for these organizations, in my mind, to sort of to preserve their role as the curators of truth, if you will. And, at the end of the day, a DMO and their staff and their leaders are probably the best position to know what's true and what's not true, and then can sort of like, help to sort of fight misinformation, fight misappropriation, help to unbias some of the biases that exist in these systems, right? So to me, that storytelling is, very important to keep going from a human perspective, but it's going to feed the AI tools, and then the AI tools are going to be better at telling those stories, if that makes sense, right? So it's almost like a loop, right? And I was, interestingly listening to a podcast just yesterday, and they were talking about kind of content creators, and how sort of they're trying to, this company is trying to figure out how to kind of preserve the value that content creators create, and create kind of a market for it. And, the point that was made in that podcast, which was really interesting, is at the end of the day, again, these AI companies need this information. They need this data. We've almost eaten all of the information in the world, right? So again, Indigenous communities, DMOs, they have a huge role to play as curators of that content and preservers of the real stories, right? And so, it's a little bit of figuring out how do we monetize that? How do we sort of make sure we protect it properly? But I think there's like a, potentially a new role for DMOs to play in, again, back to the Singapore partnership, right? If Singapore can sort of feed OpenAI systems the right stories that are accurate and fact checked, and OpenAI can become better at telling the tourism story of Singapore accurately, give tourists more accurate information. They're not going to be like led astray. Those are all positive things for both the tourist and the destination.
So, Peter, I don't know if you know this, maybe you do, but I spent the kind of 4 years that I was in university working at the visitor center counter. So, oftentimes being like the first touch point for visitors coming into the city. And I'm in my early 20s, and I get asked a lot of questions about our local Indigenous culture from particularly European visitors that don't have a lot of information. And just being a younger person at the time, like I didn't always have the most accurate information or know the background. And then just thinking about how helpful having a resource like this would have been. And as you know, most DMOs are kind of the owners of the visitor center. So I think, like you said, having DMOs kind of take that a bit of a leadership role there in helping be the keepers in a way of ensuring that it's accurate and that right information is going out to visitors. Not only helps visitors coming, but actually just like enables staff and locals to help tell the story too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to just sort of maybe just jump on that point a little bit. And I've been kind of working, as you know, Kendall, on sort of, to me, there's this sector that's sort of not defined. I'm giving it a name. It's going to be called the place-based vitality sector. And I'm really going to try to make that the name or push that name forward. And the reason for it is because, like, to your point, it's like the DMOs maybe are like the quarterback, but they have a role to play in coordinating with their Indigenous communities and their Indigenous partners. They have a role to play in terms of coordinating with the municipalities and their economic development officers. They have a role to play in terms of like partnering with the chambers and the local nonprofit organizations, because all of those organizations collectively sort of make up what the sort of place is. And when you think about tourism, it's not just about attracting tourism, but it's also destination development and value of tourism, and right, telling why should people attract and invest in Kamloops as an example, right? And so to me, the DMO plays sort of this quarterback role in sort of bringing all of those partners together and helping to tell the story of the destination, right? And so again, AI tools, to your point, if we can kind of curate that information in a very accurate way, in a way that all the stakeholders are aligned about, and then sort of, either build proprietary AI systems or do partnerships with Google or OpenAI or whoever to make sure that that information is being fed into the large language model for the next training run, so that everybody has a more accurate sort of picture of the destination and all of the opportunities around it. To me, that's the win, right? And that's the work that needs to happen, and that's why this kind of place-based vitality sector kind of is, it's all of these groups coming together, maybe under the leadership of the DMO, to really say, who are we as a destination? What is our story? What do we want to build? How do we, if I think about like localization and personalization of marketing, how do we attract the exact visitors that we want in our destination that makes sense for us, right? I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities, and every destination attracts a different kind of visitor. And if you can coordinate well, then I think you can attract the right visitor with the right personalized marketing and the right sort of data-driven marketing, right? So to me, it all fits together. There's like this big picture that it all comes together, and I think the DMO plays such a critical role in coordinating all of that. So that's my shout out to all the DMOs to sort of take your place as leaders in your communities to help kind of usher this conversation in, to build a better destination, to attract better, visitors, to attract better investors, all the different things.
Yeah, using the term quarterback is great. Just ensuring everyone who's supposed to be at the table is there. Because I think I used the word keeper before. That's the wrong word. We definitely don't want to underscore how important it is that Indigenous communities are the keeper of their stories.
Right.
But
sure.
Yeah, DMO is being the quarterback of making sure everyone's involved is a great analogy. All right, we're going to move into some rapid round, our kind of hype meter. Recently, Meta headquarters, they hosted a tourism tech retreat. And basically, This just really signals a deep interest that Meta has in tourism, which I think is really cool. The way that we're kind of seeing it right now is when you're, let's say, watching a reel from a destination, Meta AI will kind of give you that prompt like, where is this? How do I book this? Can you send this to a WhatsApp group so me and my friends can plan it? So they're really kind of incorporating those like travel prompts right in the app itself and right in like creators reels. So like put aside even like DMO marketing content. It is kind of being built right into the app that everyone's using. So height meter, thoughts
Yeah,
on
I
this?
mean this is like to me a 10 out of 10. This is huge. Like so I think that we're the way, first of all what I'll say is I think Google's reign is over. And I think every company that's leading in tech is trying their best to make sure that's the case. And I think the marketing world when it comes to AI or sorry when it comes to tourism is already a lot more complicated and is going to get more complicated. In the same vein, you know, for example, Google now is using Instagram information as part of its algorithm, or whatever. So obviously they're trying to stay on top of this as well, and they're seeing the trends of where things are going. And so to me, every AI platform or tech platform is trying to basically get your attention and keep your attention and keep you on platform for as long as possible. And this is Meta's way to do that, right? So if you can be inspired by some visual content put out by a creator and then be able to book and share it with your friends through WhatsApp. They're really leveraging their entire data ecosystem, if you will, and their entire customer base in the various different touch points to make it as seamless as possible. So I think this is the future of sort of marketing and booking. And I think that every single destination and every tourism organization is going to have to kind of get a little more sophisticated when it comes to sort of how to be found, where to be found, how to use data to understand where your customers are and how to find them, all those types of things. So, the marketing, it's interesting. It's like, oh, is marketing going to get eaten by AI? And it's like, well, marketing is going to get more complicated by AI. So, so I'm not sure if it's going to get eaten, not that quickly yet, anyways, right? So, yeah, I think this is a pretty big story and a pretty big deal.
Okay, the next one's maybe a little bit rage baity. I don't know. I feel like anything that has the word Trump in it is, it's rage bait or clickbait. Who knows? So Trump was. I don't know if the executive order went through, but there was talk in of executive order that targets woke AI content. So what this kind of means, I guess, is he's mandating neutrality on race, gender, culture. This is going to really impact like the training of the models. The critics are saying it's political interference and algorithm training. Where this kind of affects tourism is obviously tourism, there's a lot of people coming from different cultures. It's a very inclusive industry. And so how does this affect LLM's output with inclusive language for tourism? So I guess let's go with the headline. Trump executive order targets woke AI content. Hype meter.
Yeah, I mean,
Where do you
like,
land?
it definitely feels clickbaity. I think in terms of hype meter, I'm going to give this story again a 10 out of 10, but not for the headline that you gave. So I think the headline you gave is sort of the headline. But there's a lot going on behind the scenes when it comes to the Trump administration and AI. And, they released not only the executive order, but they also put out a whole kind of 24-page document, action plan. So there's actually a lot going on here, and really, I think if I can break it down, is the Trump administration is trying to make sure that America wins the AI arms race at any cost. So there's a lot here. So if you're an environmentalist, there's a lot in here in terms of like they've essentially like removed all restrictions, anything related to environment doesn't matter anymore when it comes to AI. I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but according to the Trump administration, it doesn't matter. It's second to winning this arms race, right? So, in terms of the woke stuff, I mean, listen, you can argue that some of the stuff that Joe Biden put in around the DEI stuff, it was sort of, I guess, the opposite of this. So I think to me, it's just like the political pendulum swings back and forth, and this woke stuff and DEI stuff kind of is the political punching bag, if you will, and the media grabber. What this sort of this whole woke piece really speaks to is really companies that want to have contracts with the American government. So the American government can't tell companies how to train their models, how those models should respond. But if those companies want to get contracts with the American government, then they have a little more influence, right? And so, I think individual companies have to decide on their own. I think for the most part, from what I see in the tech sector, is pretty happy about this for the most part. And it's just basically because most of them sort of believe in just freedom and being free and not being sort of mandated one way or the other. But we've seen this go in a number of different directions, right? So obviously we have the story, like, I mean, you look at X and their, crazy stuff coming out of like that platform, XAI. That's like on the very far end of the spectrum, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this all sort of plays out. But I think it's, again, it's a little bit media headline grabbing kind of stuff, the woke part of things, right? But again, I think this executive order and the the action plan from the Trump administration, like there's a lot to sink your teeth into there. And I think that, again, all companies should be paying attention to what's going on there. And, really the sort of the bottom line for me is it's America feels it needs to win at all costs, this arms race. They feel very threatened, I think, by what's going on in China. And, this is sort of a bigger geopolitical battle than just AI, right? This is sort of like the dominance of the world is on the line here. And I think Trump administration sees winning the AI arms race as a critical step in continuing to be the world leader, if you believe that that's their position.
Perfect. So 10 out of 10 for Trump. Peter said it here. Clickbait, just joking. Okay, next headline, Tourism New Zealand launches Minecraft power destination. So, as far as like the last 20, 30 years that I've heard about New Zealand, been to New Zealand, studied New Zealand, New Zealand has been like on the pedestal of tourism marketing. I feel like they've always been the showcase for their marketing ads, their videos, they're always the use case. So this is taking it one step further. They have launched a Minecraft power destination. So you can actually explore New Zealand through Minecraft. It's designed to engage Gen Z. It's combining gamification, branding. I think it's pretty cool. Hype meter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give this one a 10 out of 10 just because it's like really smart, right? If you're thinking about the sort of next generation of tourists and travelers, like what a way to engage them, right? So to me, it's like this is just like good innovative partnership and sort of using, doing destination marketing in a completely innovative way, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity for this kind of stuff. And I think that, tourism operators or I mean, DMOs and should really sort of like, to your point of like, watch what they're doing, but also try to be innovative and creative and find ways to find partnerships. I think there's a lot of interesting partnerships and our partnership opportunities like this out there, and they're being underutilized. And, I'm going to give one completely different example, but, I was at a conference a little while ago and there was like a robot head that was powered by ChatGPT. Amica, I think was her name. And I've always thought that that's like just a very clever way to attract tourists to your destination, right? It's like, I think it was like $300,000 to buy this robot and then, you can have it in your destination. And to me, it's like, that's just a really innovative, clever way to get people to your destination and talking about your destination and get, you know what I mean? And like, this is to me, getting some word of mouth and that kind of thing, right? And to me, this is like the same kind of thing, right? It's like, think outside the box, market differently, find good partners that make sense. And, now you have articles and us talking about it and all kinds of word of mouth happening, which is amazing. And obviously New Zealand's a beautiful place, so it helps.
Do your kids play Minecraft?
No, my kids don't really play
No,
video games.
neither do
Actually.
mine. So if anyone's listening and they've played Minecraft with their kids, like in the comment section, I want to hear about how this works, what the experience was like for people.
Totally.
Okay, our last little rapid round here is AI reveals 86,000 micro earthquakes under Yellowstone. So this is obviously environmental, geography related, but I think this actually has like a really big impact on tourism because if, we can use these tools to help record way in advance some large natural disasters that might come. I think that's a huge thing for tourism if we can kind of start predicting those things more easily. So hype meter on this headline.
Yeah, I'm going to give this another 10 out of 10. We've just got some big, good, positive stories here. But I agree with you, Kendall. And, this is earthquakes and that's sort of one. But, the other thing that's probably especially this summer in Canada, like forest fires, right? So, of working in a destination where it's like, this place is on fire and it's actually, as it turns out, it's only like this thing 200 kilometers away from this place is on fire, and like, you know what I mean, so like to me, all of these types of technologies and tools will allow us to have a much more nuanced conversation, a little bit more predictive, right? You know, give an example. My dad lives in West Kelowna right now, and there's a fire happening between West Kelowna and I think Peachland or something like that. And you know, I saw it on the news, and it looked like my dad's road, and I thought, oh, my dad's being evacuated. And you know, it's like I called him, and it's like just living his life. You know what I mean? Nothing to see here, right? So, you know, I know that there's stuff on fire detection, the ability to, you know, so to me, it's not only being able to detect things early and predict things, but also potentially, you know, on the fire side, for example, hey, there's some fires happening in remote areas. Can we put them out before they become a big problem for tourism, right? So to me, this is like very far reaching across the board. And I think this is the type of technology that, again, if the tourism industry sort of thinks about partnering with these types of technology companies and, you know, getting better data and analytics and information, we can be more proactive, less reactive, and we can make sure that the industry is not as impacted by these kind of negative stories, right? Again, it's like, oh, you know, some big earthquake happens and all of a sudden it's like, that's a dangerous place, nobody can go there, in the minds of a lot of people, and it's like, that's just not the right messaging, right? So yeah, I think technology is really going to help the tourism industry on a lot of these types of
Absolutely. All right. Well, that was the end of the rapid fire round. So that kind of brings us to the conclusion of our episode today. Any final thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that again, it's a very exciting time to be in business. So, you know, I think there's a lot of fear out there when it comes to AI and AI adoption. And I think that the more time I've been spending talking to people, the more excited I'm getting about the opportunities. And I think, you know, to me, it's make sure that you're looking at things from all lenses and all perspectives. It's a really exciting time to be alive and a really exciting time to be in business. And yes, we can be negative and we can look at all the, you know, be pessimistic, but, you know, I choose to be optimistic. And I think that if everybody kind of comes to the right mindset and in an optimistic mindset and looks at this as an opportunity, I think we can make some amazing things happen. So that's my sort of encouraging note for the week.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's end it there. And like, subscribe, follow our social accounts. We'll throw all of the links in the description for the podcast. And we look forward to continuing the conversation next week.
Thanks, Kendall.
Okay, thanks.